as relative, a statement of priorities, as in 1 Samuel 15. The inner attitude was prerequisite to any valid ritual expression, Isaiah 29. Foreign elements that had penetrated the Israelite sacrificial system were, of course, roundly condemned by the prophets. Such was especially the case with Israel, but also with Judah. Again, same thing, same message, same conclusion, same understanding. So we look briefly, Jeremiah 6, 19 and 20. Hear, O earth, I'm bringing disaster on this people, the fruit of their schemes, because they have not listened to my words and have rejected my Torah. What do I care about incense from Sheba, or sweet calamus from a distant land? Your burnt offerings are not acceptable. Your sacrifices do not please me. Why? Because you are in sin, because you are worshiping idols, because you are guilty of sexual immorality, because you are guilty of injustice. Therefore, I don't care about all the incense, the best, the final, but this is the sweetest smell. We get the best ingredients. I don't care. Offer all the burnt offerings you want, the offerings of devotion. Your hearts are far from me. I don't want it. Yeshua takes those words from Isaiah 29, the people draw near to me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. You can draw near with your lips. You can draw near with sacrifices. You can draw near with synagogue attendance, church attendance. You could draw near with reading the Bible extra, giving extra money, doing this, doing that. If your heart's far from God, it's meaningless. He doesn't want it. What does he tell the people in Malachi 1? Stop. Offer. I don't. Shut the temple doors. I don't want this hypocritical worship. And the day's going to come where Gentiles are actually going to worship me purely from around the world. What about Jeremiah 7? Jeremiah 7. This is actually a problem for the anti-missionary as much as for the missionary, because there's some challenges in the verses. Verse 21, this is what the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Go ahead, add your burnt offerings to your other sacrifices, and eat the meat yourselves. For when I brought your forefathers out of Egypt and spoke to them, I did not just give them commands about burnt offerings and sacrifice, but I gave them this command, obey me, and I will be your God, and you will be my people. And it goes on from there. Now, the NIV solves the difficulty by putting in the word only. When I brought your forefathers out of Egypt and spoke to them, I did not give them, I did not just give them commands about burnt offerings and sacrifices. I didn't only give them those commands, but I gave them this command, obey me. The Hebrew does not have the word just or only there. So if it's in your English translations, it is a legitimate, possible interpretation. God's saying, look, I didn't only talk to you about sacrifice and offering. What I talked to you about also was obey me. But if you take the word just out, then it's a problem for everybody, because it seems that it's saying that God never gave commands about burnt offerings and sacrifices when they came out of Egypt. When they came out of Egypt, they came out with the Passover. I mean, right at the very start of it, at the Exodus, there was an offering not just for then, but established for the generations to come, the sacrificial lamb and the blood. And then immediately on the heels of the Ten Commandments in the 20th chapter of Exodus, as you read on the immediate verses that follow into the next chapter, it's about building an altar. And quite early on, God is speaking to the people about sacrifices and offerings. Perhaps it means the first thing that I addressed was obedience. Before I made an issue of sacrifices, I made an issue of obedience. That's also another way to read it. Either way, it's a fair question for the anti-missionary as well as the missionary. This is not if this is a repudiation of sacrifices, it's actually a rewriting of the Torah. God actually never said what he said there. So either it's relative, look, I didn't only speak to you about that. Or it's saying priority, first thing I spoke to you about was this. Some have even argued, go ahead, add your burnt offerings to your other sacrifices and eat the meat yourself. The burnt offerings were the ones that went holy to the Lord. Now God's saying, eat the whole thing together. Eat the flesh. Eat your burnt offerings. For when I brought your forefathers out of Egypt and spoke to them, I did not give them commands about burnt offerings and sacrifices, meaning these specific commands that you're making such a big deal about. This is not what I was talking about. This is what I was talking about. And again, the very simple thing is you're doing the same thing your forefathers did. From the time your forefathers left Egypt, verse 25, until now, day after day, again and again, I sent you my servants the prophets, but they did not listen to me or pay attention. They were stiff-necked and did more evil than their forefathers, and you're doing the same thing. So either Jeremiah is saying the Torah as we have it is not accurate, which is not a possible option for any of us, traditional Jew, follower of Yeshua, either way. Or he's saying it's a matter of priority, or he's saying it's a matter of what I emphasized first. Either way, the point remains the same. And in Volume 2, for those that want to get into this in more depth, I give 4 potential interpretations based on the best scholarship and understanding today. And if you read the rabbis and the ancient interpretations, I deal with them as well. The same questions, same issues. Okay, how do we work this through? How do we understand this? From interpreters 1,000 years ago. But we have the same problem, same issue as throughout the prophets. Hypocritical, empty worship, putting an emphasis on the form while the substance is not there, putting an emphasis on ritual while the heart was far from God. And I'll repeat, God doesn't want our prayers prayed from an empty heart. God doesn't want our sacrifices offered with hypocritical lives. God does not want our Sabbath observance when our hearts are distant from Him. He doesn't want any of this. He wants a heart that's right with Him. Oh, and then He doesn't want prayer, He doesn't want sacrifice. No. Then Sabbath observance is pleasing to Him. Then prayer is acceptable to Him. Then the sacrifices have their rightful function. The prophets did not repudiate sacrifice. They loved the Torah, built on the Torah, nor did they give us an alternative form of atonement in the absence of the temple. Ultimately, it's the prophets who point to us in the direction of the real solution. Isaiah, more than any, the atoning power of the death of the righteous, the answer that God would actually give. When you look back in the scriptures and say, okay, the temple's been destroyed, okay, we're under judgment, something's wrong. And even the question of for 40 years, God's not accepted the sacrifices on the Day of Atonement. Now the temple's destroyed. There's this one claiming that he was the Messiah. There's this one who came with mighty signs and wonders and miracles, and his followers demonstrated that same supernatural power that claimed to be came to fulfill what was written in the Torah and the prophets and the Hebrew scriptures, and prophesied the temple would be destroyed, and said that he was giving his life as a ransom for many. Could this be what the prophets were saying after all? You're not going to look back and say, oh, no, they said prayer is okay. Oh, no, they said incense, or Torah gives flour, or money. No. You're going to say, well, look at this one who actually died for us. Look at this one by whose blood we can be transformed. Look at this one who took our sins and carried our iniquities. When you look back at the prophets, that's what you're going to see. So we are going to take up in our next section something of wonderful importance. Tremendously exciting when I studied it and learned it years ago. The atoning power, the death of the righteous. That is the ultimate answer. That's where the sacrificial system is ultimately pointing, and that is the better way that God has given us, Jew and Gentile alike.